Is it still considered a whiskey if you're using grain and a sugary syrup? Who cares?
I just said, yes, man, right away, anything.
All right, so today, hypothetically, we're gonna make some sorghum whiskey. Now, if you don't know what sorghum is, it's a little grain, also known as broom corn. Sorghum is grown all over the world for cattle feed and also people feed. It's got a very old cultivation history as far as human use. So that's on your grain side, but then you also have this syrup. And if you're from the South, you probably have seen sorghum syrup or used sorghum syrup on your breakfast. But, you know, honestly, even though I grew up in the South, I never had it. Never had it. When I got these in the mail, I tasted some, and that was the first time I'd ever had sorghum syrup. But sorghum syrup is actually not produced from the grain, it's produced from the stalks, much like sugar cane. There's a whole bunch of different varieties of sorghum. Some they prefer to grow for the stalks because they produce a lot of sap, just like sugar cane. Some they grow for grain. The sweet stalk variety is what they use to make the syrup, and they just take the canes, press them out, and get that sap out, and then condense it just like you would maple syrup, basically in giant evaporators. But neither of these has a really big following in the liquor world. And if you go to South Africa, they make a beer called umqombothi. I'm probably saying that wrong, sorry. And that is made with sorghum and also corn and sometimes barley, sometimes wheat. But sorghum is always a component to it, and sometimes they malt the sorghum, sometimes they don't. It just kind of depends on the family that's making it. And my buddy Beaver over at Beaver DIY on his channel, several years ago, he actually made a video where he made umqombothi whiskey. So that's a really interesting video. I highly recommend you check it out. I'm going to put a link up here and down in the video description for you. If you're not subscribed to Beaver's channel, definitely do so. He's got so much good distilling content. So for Beaver's recipe, he made, you know, the traditional umqombothi with corn and sorghum and mashed it and fermented it and made a whiskey. And by all accounts, it was delicious. You know, but here in the States, we don't really have anything that compares, except for a few whiskey makers in the States who do a sorghum syrup whiskey. I think there might be a couple that use the grain, but what I haven't seen is anybody who was dumb enough to put the two together. At least I haven't found any online yet. If there are some out there, that doesn't really matter because there are bourbon makers out there, and we make bourbon on this channel too, hypothetically. So we're gonna go ahead and jump into this and really just see what happens, see what kind of flavors we get. I don't really even know what to expect. The syrup, it looks like molasses, but it doesn't smell a whole lot like molasses. Regular sugarcane molasses is really rich and really dark and a little bitter. Sorghum syrup, it smells kind of like molasses, but also there's almost a grassy or straw-like aroma to it. Like you can smell the plot of land that it came from. It's definitely earthy, but there's a little bit of a vegetal note to it. Yeah, it's very different from molasses. You know, it's of course very sweet. It's got a sharper flavor to it, almost got a tartness to it or a sourness to it. It's difficult for me to describe because I don't really have anything to compare it to. So I'm not 100% sure what the flavors are gonna be coming out of this. And the grain itself, the seeds don't really taste like a whole bunch by themselves, but I mean, as you can see, I only have maybe half a pound here, and that is not enough for what I want to do. If I'm gonna play this hand, I'm going all in. So I need a lot of sorghum. And luckily that brings me real quick to today's sponsor, Olive Nation. Now if you don't know about Olive Nation, they make a ton of extracts and flavorings for baked goods, but also brewing and distilling. So they have this huge selection of extracts and flavorings that are kind of off the chart. If there's a flavor combination that you want to do, but you don't know how to do it, check out the Olive Nation website. You're gonna find what you need. They have a ton of dried fruit, they got herbs, they got spices, they got pretty much anything you might need for baking, and they also have sorghum. They have sorghum grain that apparently you can pop. I might have to try some of that while I put this project together, but it's going to be a small amount because I need all of the 25 pounds that Olive Nation sent me. Thank you very much, Olive Nation, for giving me a free hand again with picking interesting products from your incredible lineup. This is interesting. This is completely unknown to me. I have no idea what we're going to get. My point is, if you need to get weird stuff like 25 pounds of sorghum, go ahead and check the link down in the video description and make sure you use my coupon code so you can get a big fat discount on anything that you buy on their site. So thanks again, Olive Nation, for making my weird dreams come true. All right, so like I said, I have 25 pounds of sorghum. So I'm gonna take about a cup of it and set it aside, and I think we're gonna make some popcorn with it, some popped sorghum. That's what the product is marketed for. And then, you know, some ding-dong like me comes along and says, boy, I wonder if I could ferment that. I'm pretty sure if I was determined enough, I could find a way to ferment my shoe. I love this hobby. Before you ask, no, I'm not doing that. So I've got all this sorghum, but it's untoasted. I think I'm gonna toast a whole bunch of it. One of my Patreons is also my buddy Kevin over at the Grain Bench channel. I'm gonna put a link for him down in the video description. He is a grainsmith. He is an excellent maltster. He knows how to malt just about anything. So I asked him for some advice on how to toast the sorghum to get a little bit more color, a little bit more flavor in it. I know we're not making a beer, but still you're adding flavor. And just like when I was a cook for years and years, and the best way you can approach a recipe is to put layers of flavor in there. And even if it's going to eventually get distilled and some of those flavors are going to get lost, some of them are not. So never be afraid to build your flavors. And to that end, I think we might do one other weird thing. You know, we recently just came through the holidays, and I was doing a lot of baking, which is why I'm currently a little bit fatter. Anyway, I've been making some sourdough, so I've got a really healthy sourdough starter here, and I think I'm gonna use this as my yeast starter. Maybe let it run for a few days, and you know, if it looks like it's gonna peter out before it eats all the sugar, then we'd throw in some commercial yeast. I love sourdough. I gotta stop eating carbs, but I'm not gonna let my sourdough starter die. This is my stinky pet. If you've never heard of anybody using sourdough starter in a whiskey before, I did a couple years ago, hypothetically. Video link up here and down in the video description. That is a whole nother topic. So let's move on. First, we must toast. All right, so now that we've got our grain all ground up, there's one other thing that I want to add to this recipe, and that's just some plain old rolled oats or quick oats. You don't want to use raw oats because they'll need to be gelatinized and ground. So rolled oats or quick oats are going to be the easiest way to go. I'm going to do about 5 pounds because I don't know. I like round numbers. So I'm doing 25 pounds of sorghum, 5 pounds of oats, and then the amount of syrup that we're doing is roughly about 8 pounds. So along with the link for the Olive Nation sorghum grain down in the video description is also going to be a link for the sorghum syrup that I bought on Amazon. And then since I'm not using any malt at all in the mash, I'm going to throw in some commercial enzymes. Any brand of high temperature liquid amylase will do just fine. This one's Proof 33 Alphazyme. I don't think they're on Amazon. And then a glucoamylase. So I got 12 gallons of water on the stove heating up right now. That's this much in metric. I'm gonna put the entire recipe down in the video description so you don't have to try and memorize any of this, and all the measurements will be in American Standard and metric. So the last thing that we're gonna add after this is all mashed and we're ready to strain it is about 4 or 5 handfuls of rice hulls, and that's just gonna make it drain a lot better once we get it into our strainer basket. So, all right, now I just gotta wait for water to heat up. Current temperature is 182 degrees, so I'm going to leave the lid off, let it cool to about 150, and then add my enzymes, and then we'll close it up and wrap it up for the night. See how thick and sticky that is and starchy. Adding some enzymes, both gluco and regular amylase. No reaction. That's good. All right, so the sorghum run is done. First off, let me say that I am really surprised about the sourdough starter because I expected to have to go in with some daddy yeast about halfway through. Because a lot of times when you do a wild fermentation, like on that vanilla rum, I had to go in a week later and add some daddy yeast to finish off the fermentation. But this sourdough starter was like a bullet. Despite not adding any beta glucanase to kind of thin out the amount of oats I put in this thing, it really did a good job because the wash ended up as thin as water. So that was nice. Okay, so before we do the tasting, let me just say a massive thank you to all of my Patreons, all of you guys down here, and anybody that's not listed. Thank you so much for helping me with recipe creation over the next couple of projects that are coming up, for supporting the channel, and just being there for me to bounce ideas off of. You guys are absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. And as always, you guys are keeping my lights on. Thank you so much. So I have a jar of hearts at about 72% ABV, and I watered that down to around 40%. At 72%, it smells amazing, and there's no bite at all. I was worried that the sorghum syrup was going to add a little bit of, sugary bite to it, but it really didn't. So very pleased with that. So anyway, let's try the watered down, the 40%. I am picking up some of the sugar, a lot of grain, some butter, like you would get in diacetyl. So there might be a little diacetyl in this one, but I mean, I let it sit for a good month. That's really good. Now, the grain flavor in this, it almost tastes really fresh, like really fresh grain. Not quite like raw grain like this. There is like a fresh milled kind of toasty grain flavor to it. And I think that's because it's sorghum and we didn't malt it. And not malting the grain will sometimes give you a fresh grain flavor, like almost smelling the grain dust off a mill or something. So we got a little bit of that, a little biscuity flavor. And I'm getting a little bit of that funk that you get from wild fermentation. And it started in the wash within like 2 days. So once that sourdough really started kicking through, you started picking it up off the wash. It's nice. You know, this is basically kind of a rum whiskey hybrid because we're using a straight sugar syrup base along with grain. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to use that sourdough. And I was successful. I got the funk. And to me, the sweetness isn't molassesy. It tastes more like that sorghum syrup. So that distinctive flavor difference actually carries through. So I think this has all the components to age into a really nice whiskey. So I have figured out what I want to do. I've got this big ass bowl of hooch proofed down to about 54%, 53% in between there. And I still have the jars of the sorghum syrup. And so I've got a little over 2 liters. And I saved just a little bit of the syrup because I want to have some on cornbread. But when these are done aging, I think I might finish off with just a little drip of this sorghum syrup in each jar. But that's for later. I have a whole bunch of wood that my buddy Ken from Barrel Charwood sent me over the years. I have a huge collection of it. And I was, you know, smelling this and tasting this and thinking about how I wanted to age it. I'm gonna go with some Amburana wood. That's from Brazil, and it smells like cookies. I mean, straight up, it smells like cookies. And the idea of giving this kind of a spiced cookie kind of flavor to it really appeals to me because I think that'll go really well with it. And some charred new American white oak. It's a level 3 char on there. So I think that'll go really, really well. Now, here's the thing about Amburana wood is it smells fantastic, but if you let it sit in your spirit for too long, it's gonna start tasting like camphor. So we're only gonna leave this in the jars for 1 week, and then we're gonna pull it out. I'm actually gonna check it after like 3 days just to make sure it's not going off the rails, because this stuff is so strong and the resins are so powerful in there that whatever combination of chemicals it is that makes this taste like, I mean, straight up cinnamon, clove, ginger, stuff like that. It doesn't smell like wood, it smells like dessert. If it sits too long in the powerful solvent that is ethanol, it just starts pulling all kinds of nasty shit. So nothing that can hurt you, is just doesn't taste very good. Then we'll do a tasting with this, probably at the end of the year. We'll do a big tasting of all the projects that I've made, and we'll see how this sorghum whiskey aged up. And I think it's appropriate that we're leaving the labels on these jars. So there you go, there's our jars. And I got another about 700 or 800 mils that I may do something else with. I'm not quite sure. But I'm just gonna leave these here on the counter so that I remember to take out the Amburana wood after a week or so. And then once we get that out, we'll just let them sit with the oak for the rest of the year. I figured out what to do with this other one. So I was digging through my wood pile one last time. Ken sent me these charred white oak staves that have been soaked in sherry. So just like in the Scotch industry, they use old sherry casks. There we go. We're gonna have some good experiments to try at the end of the year. If you want to pick some of this up to try your own sorghum whiskey experiment, make sure you click that link down in the video description in the top comment for Olive Nation, and use the coupon code that's in there so that you can get a discount on anything that you buy. The flavorings, the spices, the grain, the cool sugars that they have, anything that you might need. And if you need any aging wood, there will be another link down in the video description for Barrel Char wood products. My buddy Ken that sells all these cool woods. All right, so if you enjoyed this video, do me a favor and hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Hit the subscribe button down there and the little bell icon right next to it so that you can get notified when I post new content. And if you have any questions about this, if you've ever done your own sorghum whiskey, whether it was just the syrup or just the grain or a combination like I did, let me know down in the comments. Look at this giant bowl of popcorn I have. I don't know if I want to try and make a giant bowl of it, but it is pretty fucking good. So yeah, you can make whiskey and a snack. Thanks for watching. Talk at you later.